Yo, what's up? This is your girl Dragon and it's time for another Fortnite creative tutorial. I'm going to be showing you guys how to create a pregame with a random game location mechanic. This has been asked for quite a lot in the Discord, so I want to be sure to drop it to you guys. And if you want to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe and share and like. Alright, let's go ahead and jump right into it. Let's go. Alright, so I went ahead and put together this test area to show you how everything's working. First, let's go through the game structure. So this is acting as my pregame area, and I have 2 player spawn pads. And you see that this is going to be fit for a 1v1 type of game. Now, when the players spawn in, there's going to be a timer that's going to select their teams. This timer is going to basically give the system time enough to assign teams. When a player spawns in, they're going to be on a global team, which is represented here. Now, when this player spawns here, they will be registered to a player reference device that's going to be activated when the timer is successful. This player reference device will activate and switch whichever player who spawned here to team 2. And the same for player 1 or whoever spawns here. If they spawn here, they'll be registered to this player reference device. And when the timer is successful, it will activate it and switch them to team 1. Once that process is done, it's going to start the game timer. And it's going to start the random number generator, or RNG device. This generator is connected to 2 triggers, and depending on which number or section this lands on, it's going to trigger an event that's going to enable the mutator zones that are connected to specific areas in the map to teleport players. So I have 2 mutator zones here, mutator zone for area 2 and the mutator zone for area 1 right beneath it. And one trigger is assigned to trigger area 1 and the other is assigned to trigger area 2. Once that takes place, for example, when mutator zone for area 1 enables, it's going to teleport the players to these assigned teleporters. I have 1 for team 1 and 1 for team 2. If it triggers area 2, then they will be teleported to area 2 teleporters here as well. 1 for team 1 and 1 for team 2. These teleporters are assigned to their respective teams so that each member goes to their selected areas. Now that you know the structure, let me tell you all the devices that you're going to need for this particular setup. You're going to need 2 mutator zones. However, if you're going to have more areas in your game, you're going to need as many mutator zones that reflects how many different areas you want them to teleport to. For example, if you have 4 areas, then you'll need 4. If you have 7, then you'll need 7, and so on. You'll need player spawner pads, and here for this example I'm using 2. You'll need 2 player reference devices, 2 class selectors. Again, if it's for a 1v1, keep the numbers proportionate to the teams. So if you have 3 spawners here, then of course you're going to need 3 player reference devices and 3 class selectors and 3 class designers and so forth. So you're going to need class designer, team settings, and inventory device. You'll need 1 additional class selector for the global team and 1 additional team settings and inventory device for global. Right? You'll need 2 timers, and I named the timer device picking teams for the first timer, and then timer device game starter for the second timer. You will also need a random number generator, and I call this random number generator round picker. You'll also need triggers, and of course the amount of triggers reflecting the amount of areas that are on your map. So of course for this example I have 2 triggers and 2 mutator zones because I have 2 areas. Alright, now that you know all the devices that you need, let's go ahead and jump into the settings. Alright, let's go ahead and look at game settings. So for my max players, since this is a 1v1, I have it set to 2 players. Voice chat of all, teams of 3, because we have team 1, team 2, and then a global team. The team size is 1 player per team. Our default class identifier is no class. However, we want to set that to class 3 because that's our global, which will be considered our default. And I have it set to total rounds of 3 for this tutorial. Alright, let's go ahead and jump into it. Let's start with the player spawner pads. So I have one player spawner 1 and another player spawner 2. And we'll start with this one. It is enabled during phase always, and so forth. When the player is spawned, we're going to send an event to the class selector global to change player to team and class, and register the player on the player reference device for player 1. Let's go ahead and look at the rest for this particular spawn pad. So this is the player reference device for player 1. And showing the hologram is optional. For functions, we're going to register player when receiving from player spawner 1, and it should be automatically binded once you set that on the player spawner pad. You're going to want to activate it when receiving from timer device, picking teams on success. And for events, when it is activated, we're going to send an event to the class selector for team 1 to change player to team and class. Alright, the class selector for team 1. We're going to switch the class to 1 and switch the team to 1. For functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from the player reference device on activated. Again, that should already be binded once you set it up. And that's it. The class designer for team 1 allows you to create unique characteristics for your team. And here you guys can check out what I have here for team 1. And there's no functions or events. Alright, and last up is the team settings and inventory. I didn't name that one, so let's go ahead and do that right now. This should be for team 1. Alright, and these are the settings. You want to make sure it is set to a default class identifier of 1, and so forth. Again, all the other options are optional. and depends on what you want for your game. All right, and there we go. A lot of don't overrides. All right, and then we have events and functions, nothing. All right, so that's it for team 1. Let's go ahead and move over to team global and check out the class selector. We're going to switch to class 3 and team to switch to is 3. For functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from the player spawner 1 and player spawner 2. Again, those should already be binded once you set them up. For the team settings and inventory for the global class, make sure you place the name here you want for your global class team. I just put global there and so forth. Ensure that your default class identifier is 3. And so forth. Everything is up to you from here on. And then let's see here, you can see there's just a bunch of don't overrides because I really didn't adjust those settings, and there's no functions and there's no events. All right, now let's check out team 2. So on player spawn, we have enabled in phase always and so forth. And for events, when players spawn, send an event to class selector global to change player to team and class, and to register player to the player reference device PS2. All right, let's take a look at player reference PS2. So you'll see that the settings are quite the same, especially under all options, with the exception that when you go to functions, you're going to register player when receiving from player spawner 2. On player spawn, again, that should already be binded once you set that on your player spawner pad. We're going to activate when receiving from timer device, picking teams on success. When it is activated, we're going to send an event to the class selector, team 2, to change player to team and class. All right, so let's take a look at class selector team 2. You want to make sure you switch it to a class of 2 and a team of 2. And everything is optional from there on. And for functions, we're going to change player to team and class when receiving from player reference PS2 on activated. Again, that should already be binded and right there for you. All right, for class designer team 2, I've named it team 2, and make sure your class identifier is also reflecting team 2. Now there's tons of options here if you want to adjust the characteristics for the team, so be sure to check those out. And for functions and events, there's nothing, okay? Next, we have team settings and inventory for team 2. And make sure you place your team name and team description and set it to team 2 as well as class 2. And everything again is up to you. No functions and no events. So that takes care of part of the pregame. Let's go ahead and take a look at the mutator zones. All right, so for the mutator zones, you see I have 2 here for mute zone area 1 and mute zone area 2. And let's check out those settings. Have enabled on phase none, and so forth. And as for functions, we're going to enable when receiving from trigger area 1 on triggered, and player entering zone, teleport to A1, team 1 teleport, and teleporter A1 team 2 teleport. Again, A1 is standing for area 1. And then for mute zone area 2, it's enabled on phase none, and so forth. For functions, enable when receiving from trigger area 2 untriggered, and when player entering zone, send an event to teleport them to area 2. So teleporter area 2 team 1 teleport, and teleporter A2 team 2 teleport. The random number generator. So I have it set to a value of 1, a value limit of 2, with a winning value of 1. A roll time of 6 seconds, and so forth. For functions, we're going to activate when receiving from timer device picking teams on success. And that's it. Alright, quick tip. If you want to add more sections to your random number generator, you simply have to update the value limit to however many sections you need. So if you have, let's say, 7 rounds, right, you see it's going to divide it up into 7. And when you roll it, it will behave the same. Now, another thing is you want to make sure that your triggers fit within these sections. So for instance, you see how this is placed between the lines. This will not trigger correctly. So you want to make sure it is positioned properly. You can also adjust the size of your triggers to fit more evenly into the sections. Now for the triggers, I have one for area 1 and I have one for area 2. And area 1, we're going to be activating on team any and so forth. And what's really important, you want to make sure that it is triggered by sequencers and so forth. There are no functions, and for events on triggered, we're going to send an event to the mute zone area 1 to enabled. Again, this should already be binded because we did it already on the mute zones. And then let's see, trigger area 2 is practically the same. And for events on triggered, we're going to send an event to mute zone area 2 to enable. All right, let's go ahead and jump to the timers. So timer device picking teams. This is the first timer that players will see once the game starts. I have it set to a duration of 10 seconds and I named the timer team chooser. It will be enabled at game start, and that is very important. Make sure it applies to everyone and not just a single player. It will reset when it is complete, so make sure that is there as well. And I have timer running text set to picking teams. And there are no functions. And events, we have a few things going on here which should automatically be binded. So on success, we're going to send an event to the random number generator to activate. The player reference PS1 to activate. The player reference PS2 to activate. The timer device game start to start. And we're going to also enable that device as well. So timer device game starter enable. And that's it. For timer device game starter, I have it set to a duration of 7 seconds and it's called Game Starter. And when the timer is running, it's going to say till game starts. And the rest is there, you see. And then for functions, I'm going to start when receiving from timer device picking teams on success. And there's no events. Alright, so we've taken care of the timer and the random number generator. Let's take a look at the teleporters. So I have 2 teleporters here for area 1, and one for team 1, and one for team 2. So you want to make sure you do not sign any type of teleporter group. It will be enabled on all phases, and have this one for team 1, a selected team of 1, and a selected class of 1. You do not have to have your teleporter rift visible, but I have it visible just for tutorial purposes. For functions, we're going to teleport when receiving from mutator zone area 1 when player entering zone. Again, that should already be binded, and that's it. And then for teleporter area 1 team 2, it is the same with the exception that we're going to use a selected team of 2 and a selected class of any. And for functions, teleport when receiving from mutator zone area 1 on player entering zone. For area 2, it is exactly the same setup, except we're going to be switching that mutator zone. So you'll see here, teleporter area 2, team 1, selected team 1, selected class 1, and so forth. Functions, teleport when receiving from mutator zone area 2 on player entering zone. And team 2, teleporter area 2 for team 2. We're going to have it selected team 2, selected class any, and so forth. For functions, you want to make sure it's teleport when receiving from mutator zone area 2 on player entering zone. Alright, that completes the entire setup for all the settings you need to put this together. Let's go ahead and drop those teleporters in the 2 areas I have here and run a test. Alright, let's go. Alright, the game is starting, and I see the player references are working perfectly, and everyone starts off on the global team. Now as soon as it picks the team, you're going to see an effect there, and you can see that it has divided us into team 1 and team 2, and there we are teleported to the first game area to play, and we'll go ahead and end the round. So keep in mind that this is all randomized, so it's going to truly depend on where that random number generator lands for each round. So you might have some rounds where they're going to be the same, but you might have some rounds when they're going to be different. Alright, looks like it picked the same round again for round 2. Let's see what happens in round 3. Alright. Now we're going to be back on that global team, right? And then we're going to be switched again and divided. And there we go. And for round 3, we are in the game area 2 area. Perfect. Alright, let's go. Yo, that's gonna do it for this tutorial, and I definitely hope it helps you guys out and it helps your future projects to come. In addition to that, if you're feeling so kind, be sure to support me with my creator code. It's right there on the screen. You could drop it in the item shop, and if you do, I really appreciate you. Alright you guys, that's gonna go ahead and do it, and I'll see ya on the next one. Bye!